This is the State of the City Address, presented to the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. Mayor Cornett gave this year's address on Tuesday, January 25th at the Cox Business Services Convention Center.
Thank you very much. It is 2005, 116 years since our great-grandfathers drove a stake into the ground and called it home. 98 years since our state legislature selected our city as the state capital. 63 years since the conception of Tinker Field. 12 years since the beginning of MAPS. 10 years since a bomb blew up our federal building. 6 years since an F5 tornado entered our city at one end and exited the other. And 3 years since we began MAPS for Kids. It is 2005, and I probably don't have to tell most people in this room that the state of our city is pretty good. But I do want to remind everyone that the state of a city, the state of the lives of 520,000 people, cannot be summed up as a whole. We have low unemployment, but if you're unemployed, things could be better for you. People have problems, cities have problems, but overall, how is Oklahoma City doing compared with municipalities across the country? There is no doubt that we are in an envious position. This afternoon, I want to spend a few minutes to talk about our priorities, our direction, our focus, take stock of 2004, and certainly look ahead to 2005 and beyond. Well, as most of you know, the list of projects and ideas that come through City Hall is both incredibly large in number and also incredibly diverse. Nonetheless, things get prioritized. To get anything accomplished, you have to prioritize. And nearly a year ago, I spoke to many of you and identified 3 of my priorities for 2004. Number 1 was the continued successful implementation of MAPS for Kids. Number 2 was determining the appropriate funding solution for the improvements that we wanted to make at State Fair Park. And number 3 dealt with our city budget and to begin to work toward finding a long-term solution to the city's budgetary stress that we experience in our general fund. So let me start by giving an update on those 3 issues. First of all, during my readings, I collect quotes that I think might help serve me later, and I scribbled one down a few months ago that I think applies well to MAPS for Kids. And it applies well because I think there are so many highly visible, positive initiatives that are playing out in the city. So much positive energy that I think sometimes it's easy to forget the generational, the sociological, and the economic impact of MAPS for Kids. So yes, there's a large number of positive things going on, but it's important to focus. And the quote I use to help focus my perspective, and I've made part of my message to the other citizens of Oklahoma City and to you too, is the big thing to remember is that the big thing is the big thing. And the big thing is MAPS for Kids. Yes, there are some new and exciting projects going on throughout this city. Concepts and ideas, but we can't lose our focus and our commitment to ensuring that MAPS for Kids is implemented successfully. Our children, our quality of life, our growth all depend on it. So with that in mind, let's go over a quick update and an overview on MAPS for Kids and where we are here in January of 2005. First, a reminder, MAPS for Kids is funded by 2 sources. A penny on the dollar sales tax for 7 years that will generate over $500 million, and there was a $180 million bond issue that passed on that same night, so that's a total of nearly $700 million. Of that $700 million, nearly $550 million will be spent on the Oklahoma City public school system, and the rest is spent in our suburban school districts throughout the city. So we collect the penny on the dollar for 7 years. We have 3 years behind us now, 4 years to go in that process. So this summer, we will actually pass the halfway point of collecting that penny on the dollar. The 7-year tax will cease at the end of 2008, and because we pay for the MAPS projects as we go, the construction schedule will continue to roll out projects through 2010. So we're still fairly early in the process, but here's where we stand. First, with the construction projects, $470 million for 72 projects. 2 of these projects have already been completed, Star Spencer High School and Phase 1 out at Wheeler Elementary. 4 projects are under construction right now, Douglas High School, Grant High School, Ridgeview, and Telstar Elementaries. 12 projects are under design, 2 high schools, 10 elementary, 4 projects in the design contract negotiations, 4 projects in the architectural selection. We are entering a phase of MAPS for Kids where we're going to have groundbreaking ceremonies and ribbon cuttings on a monthly and sometimes weekly basis for several years to come. Transportation projects, $9 million total, and it's 160 new buses provided to the Oklahoma City Public School District. That's an entirely new fleet. We've already delivered 80 buses. The other 80 will be delivered this year, an entire new fleet of buses for the Oklahoma City public school system. And the third section is technology. $52 million of that includes 700 new computers installed throughout the school district, over 1,000 new presentation systems installed throughout the district, and there's a network upgrade that's part of the technology but happens during the construction phase. And finally, point 4 on the suburban school district program, $150 million of MAPS goes into our suburban schools. 23 suburban school districts receive funding, and it's based on the number of Oklahoma City students they have attending their schools. So some of the suburban school districts receive just a little bit of money, but some receive a lot. The Putnam City School District will receive about $50 million from MAPS for Kids, so it's significant. So far, the 23 suburban districts have requested and spent approximately $30 million on 140 different projects. So the MAPS for Kids program is proceeding as planned. Projects are being completed as scheduled. And again, since final revenues for the program are not going to be received until January 2009, the last projects are not scheduled to be completed until 2010. It is my opinion that MAPS for Kids is going to have significant long-term effects for this city. There's obviously the educational aspect, but there's the economical impact, and there's the impact on urban sprawl. For over 100 years, we have been a city that expanded on the edges, and this century of perimeter growth has left us with a 21st century city that has more than its share of inefficiencies, some of which Fred talked about a while ago. Cities in general, just because we're so large, suffer from inefficiencies. We're always looking for ways to become more efficient. And for our city, MAPS for Kids is our best long-term tool toward creating a market in the inner city. A market for housing, a market for retail, and a market for job creation. Now, still, some of the toughest work and tougher decisions involving MAPS for Kids remain in front of us. From a standpoint of population growth, some sections of our school district are growing faster than others. And I believe the appropriate response is going to be to make some alterations to the original plan that was conceived 4 years ago. I know the school district is currently seeking public input before it requests any changes, but hopefully whatever alterations might be necessary can be made in 2005 to the program. But overall, keep in mind, there is plenty of capacity in the system. And by that I mean, if you look at MAPS for Kids as a whole, even with these demographic shifts, there's plenty of classroom space and there's enough money to complete the project. So student capacity, financial capacity, both in good place. The question is, with these demographic shifts taking place, where are the kids going to be living in 2010, 2015 and beyond, and what do we need to do to make sure that there's classroom space for them in their neighborhoods? And demographic shifts are not confined to the Oklahoma City school system. For example, it's interesting to note, and I just picked up this tidbit the other day, the Putnam City school system no longer considers itself a suburban district. They consider themselves an urban district with many of the same challenges as the traditional inner city schools. But the implementation of MAPS for Kids was our #1 priority in 2004, and as I stand here today, I can assure you, it is our #1 priority in 2005. Our second priority for 2004 was working on a funding solution for the improvements that we need to make at State Fair Park. And this issue is probably still fresh on your minds. We took a funding solution to the voters just over a month ago. It passed, and the result is that Oklahoma City will remain the horse show capital of the world. Yeah, yes. You know, there's still a lot of improvements we'd like to make at the fairgrounds, but we're very pleased that this first phase is underway, and the first actual action you will see at the fairgrounds as you drive past I-44 is the demolition and the removal of All Sports Stadium. So you'll see that here in the first half of 2005. The third priority that we've been addressing is the budgetary issue that affects the city's general fund. As mayor, and I know I speak for the council, we want to ensure that we're on long-term track for budgetary success in the big picture. We want to continue to manage our resources efficiently, and therefore I organized a task force to ensure that we're doing just that. Ultimately, I hope it will lead to some suggestions to the mayor's office and the city council that can lead to positive effects for our underfunded city services, like parks and animal welfare and code enforcement and some other areas.